Hello and welcome to Chestnut Checkers. I am Keith Riddle, your co-host with Jordan Tampien, and today we are guestless in Spokane.
We are guestless, I know. As if you hadn't heard enough from us, but
Right.
yes.
No, every once in a while, we obviously are trying to stack some great guests for you guys to listen to, and every once in a while we thought we'd just do some questions with Keith and Jordan. We gotten a lot of feedback from different people, listeners that are wanting to pick our brains on stuff. So I don't know if you want the hot seat first, Jordan, if I'll take it, but start me off with what's cracking in Jordan's world.
I mean, so we're working on a ton of different projects, and so a lot of my questions typically come around, is that your project?
What are you doing? Yeah, is that your project?
Is that your project? Are you wrecking my neighborhood again?
Right.
I'm like, easy. And so I think the question I get the most, which I would fire to you and your hussy, is let's start with one project you're working on or just completed that you're super proud of and want to say a little more about.
Proud of. I mean, I've been banging away on this Garland project for years now, right? And I always like I'm sure you felt this before, but it's interesting when you start developing real estate, whether it's raw land or multifamily, like you start so much before people think you start, right? And there's so many deals that never come to fruition or never go anywhere. But usually by the time people see a project, whether they see like a notice of public hearing, like sign up, or they see a building start, and then they're like, "Hey man, tell me about your new project on Garland." And I'm like, "I've been working on that for 3 years."
It's so true. And for anyone listening, that is the big white sign with red letters tells you
The notice
the
of public hearings, yes.
neighborhood is changing. So
It's about to, or can
change potentially.
can. So yeah, I would say Garland for sure for me.
Tell us a little about Garland for those that don't. I know it decently well. So
Yeah, so we basically did a 62 unit, 4-story apartment build.
Yeah.
Nice, grade A space. It's attached to the old Masonic Lodge, the North Hill Masonic Lodge on Garland, which happened for a multitude of reasons, but I think actually accents the Masonic.
it looks amazing, by the way. If you would have just kept it as a separate building, I don't think it would have looked as good.
Well, it would have dwarfed it,
Yeah.
and then it would have seemed older. And I think it
Yeah.
got some like modern flair.
Yeah.
They matched the exterior architecture on the east side, coming east with a little addition. So additional commercial space, and then also the cool thing is we were able to attach an elevator to the back side of the
That's
Masonic
cool.
because the foyer. I think that's what you call it.
Sure.
Foyer of the.
It's like a porte cochere. I always think. I always find a way to get that into some sentence.
The main entrance, whether parking lot side for the tenants and street facing side, comes into like average lobby, mail room, all that kind of stuff. There's a gym, but there's an elevator there because it's a 4-story building, and we were able to actually have like a dual door elevator, so the elevator opens on both sides, and then there's half stops in it. So even though the new building is 4 stories and the Masonic is 2 stories, they didn't line up accordingly. So it's a 6-stop elevator that opens on both sides. But what's really cool about it is we were able to take that new addition as well as the Masonic and make it like true ADA access.
Awesome.
Without having a funky ramp or like one of those, So super proud of that. But yeah, 62 units, 4 stories, attaches the Masonic. We just got our certificate of occupancy, our TCO.
Nice.
I found out about this. Temporary certificate
Correct.
of occupancy, because we got occupancy in December. There's some landscaping stuff we got to do outside this spring, and then honestly, the holdup was the elevator. Like at the very end, right? Like that's the one thing you wait for. But elevator's all good. Got a TCO and started leasing, and I think they said they're 22% occupied.
Oh yeah, it's gonna lease up fast. This is a cool building.
February 1st-ish, so in a month,
And in the winter, it's a month in the winter,
right?
right? That's a big deal.
So yeah, no, it is a huge deal, and I'm like I said, I'm super excited and proud of that. So that's probably like the biggest thing that's been happening in my world that's like come to fruition lately. And then I would say the second biggest thing, I'm like stealing more big things here.
As you should.
Is I'm going to do something similar with the office over here on Sprague, and I just recently this week got some designs back from Evan over at Trek. Architecture.
Best in town. He's super good.
Shout out to Evan and Trek. And so I'm stoked about that. And at this point in time, they're like super pretty pictures on paper. They mean absolutely nothing, but you look at them and I'm like, that's awesome. So stoked about that. So. And I think that one right now is slated to be anywhere between, depending on how many floors we go, 5, 6, whatever.
Keep it at 5.
Yeah, that's gonna fire. Yeah, tell us about that, Jordan. What happens at 5 floors?
So 5 floors, you can do all wood framed, which will save you about 30% on your cost. Sixth floor moves it into what's called a mid-rise, which means you get concrete level on the first floor. So Parkview West over by Brick West, 7 stories. That's 2 stories of concrete. They call it a podium style. And so what you do is, for some reason, just probably obviously an engineer would speak better to it, but once you go over that 5th story of a wood frame, and the biggest difference being most buildings that are concrete, you can pull walls down anywhere because they're not load bearing.
Right.
Wood is cheaper, but they're also load bearing. So if you ever want to change the use of it in the future, you have to run header. It's near impossible with some of those bigger buildings. So
yeah,
and you don't gain a lot by that 6th floor. You gain a lot by the 5th. So.
Well, and so that's that thing, right? Like insight into the development world is like when people look around town and you look around Spokane, it's like, how come everything's a 3-story walk up?
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Like how come everything's a 3-story walk up? Like when you're looking around at development, and it's because it's one of the most efficient ways to build. Right.
4th story, you don't need an elevator. 5th story, you do. So
Right.
if you go 4 stories with it, you actually could do it all as a 4-story walk up. Right. And you're
Right.
like, what does an elevator mean? Well, that's $10,000 per unit. What does that mean? It means I need to charge for every 10,000, I got to charge another $100 in rent.
Yeah.
Well, how are we ever going to make this place affordable if we have to have those costs?
And someone must have figured out somewhere along the way, I don't know who it was, that people don't like to walk up 4 stories, but they'll walk up 3. I don't know.
Only in Friends. Only in Friends. They were on like the 7th floor walk up in New York. Like it's also very situational. Like I was in New York. I mean, I went and toured this town. It was 6 stories walk up.
Walk up. No elevator.
No elevator.
Groceries,
and you just keep going.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I'm in a 1-story walk up, arguably it's just the 2nd floor at Lola Lofts, and you don't think about it, but you're like, okay, we need to get a Costco order. That's a family experience now. You can strap a bag under our dog Nash, and like you got to carry your weight, buddy. We got to get this box up here.
If you can walk, you can carry a load.
Versus our old house, it's like you pull in the garage, all the same level. The food you just hand off, and so it's for Spokane. It's super unique, and then our issue is our rents cap at a certain amount. So in Seattle, that same unit could go to $4,000 a door, which allows you more room. So you can spend $400,000 per unit at that $100 per, right? And so we're kind of capped in that world, and you want this extra nice stuff. Like my favorite part of the process is the rendering picture. The downside is now I'm so jaded. I'll see it, and I'm like, nope, too many windows. Yep, can't use that siding. Yep, that's a cantilever edge. Can't use that. All right, so we're going to build a box again, is what you're telling me. But it's going to be a super sweet box inside.
It's the most efficient, structurally sound. But you're always trying to do stuff that makes it more aesthetically appealing or adds amenities. This is actually, it's a good question, is what do you typically target for amenities? So again, for those listeners, it's like when you build an apartment, you're looking at like, we can provide a certain amount of space in the building that's going to be an amenity to the people that live there. We're going to have to pay for that space in perpetuity, right? We're gonna have to pay to build it. But if I build a gym, then that gym doesn't necessarily pay me anything, but I could put another unit there. So then you're always like, well, do I put another unit in there or do I put a gym in there? If I put a gym in there, it's an amenity for all the people that live there. But now I'm not getting any rent off that space, which I'm not trying to get rent off every inch, but you're sitting there going, hey man, I got hallways, I got corridors, I got elevators, so when you guys look at amenities, what do you find are typically like some of your favorite amenities, or what do you find that people like want the most?
Yeah, so one thing people don't quite understand is that in order to get rents down, we need more units.
Right.
Right? Because what do more units do? They then force whatever the Warren, I mean, the developers, like they did a great job. It's over on Riverside and Brown, and it's a podium style building, but they put amenities, they have an outdoor courtyard. And so the people that are looking for it, you're trying to compete with that. And so when we're looking at it, we need what increases rental value or tenant value when you're in a building. So fitness centers typically do well. We've started adding business centers, Zoom room style stuff, work from home atmosphere. And then really in Spokane, the biggest one is pets. So one of the projects we're working on the Peyton, we literally have a dog wash. So, basically, so we took an old light well, took the bottom of it, elevated a turf field, basically, that has sprinklers and heat. So year round, you can take your dog in there, cleans it out, air, like basically keeps the smell. You can take them right out the door, and right outside is this like machine you put your dog through, washes, grooms it, and does it all in that building. And so fitness is a must. I think the one we don't see much ROI is people think a pool is great. And what we call a pool is that's a lease up tool. Most people see it and they're like, one day I'll use that, and most don't.
Yeah.
And so pools are tough. So we've been looking at splash pads, something kids would use more, something that are a little easier. And then when they're in the winter, or honestly, not even the winter, the 6 months of a year you can't use it.
Yeah.
It's actually a hardscape. So then it's still usable surface. It's not just a
go
fenced
kick
area.
a soccer ball around or ride a skateboard or do something.
And then I think the gyms are super important. And I think it's the new ones of a mirror or a Peloton or a kind of engaged activity gym spaces.
Well, another thing that I think is important to note or is cool when you see it is buildings that promote commercial space on like the main level. And then those kind of, even those quote unquote tenants can also become amenities.
Yep.
So you get stuff like coffee shops or you get stuff like, and even though they're a tenant, it's an amenity to the people that live there, right? So like, hey, downstairs in the basement, you have a, you know, like I think you guys done a great job over there with like a union, having like a workout studio or having like, you know, and it's kind of a built-in amenity that's not a loss leader.
Yeah. So and it's hard because like most developers I've been working with, they write that space off as zero.
Yeah.
Because of the cost to turn it over when a union's not in there, when a coffee shop's
not in there.
Yeah.
So they write it off as a zero, even if it is like income producing commercial space.
Yeah, the only reason, so Peyton, we have obviously a first floor full of commercial, but they were long-term commercial.
Yeah.
And so those are pieces. And so what we're trying to do is be amenity adjacent now.
Amenity adjacent.
Yep. Write that down. So you're amenity adjacent, where you get all the benefits
to you.
Yeah, it's all the benefits of that facility. Like, so I look at one, I'm not in the project now, but Ryan Berg and his team took on the South Hill project. So it's 96 units, kind of helped from the start, but it is next to everything that Jim Frank's doing in his Garden District project up there. So you didn't pay for any of those amenities, but now your tenants get the benefit of those. His amenities get the benefit of those tenants. And so you're trying to build almost this ecosystem versus it all always being contained in that building. Because if you put a coffee shop in your new development there, it's hard.
Business models, I'll just build next to Jim Frank.
You would not go wrong. I tried that one. He just is really smart about grabbing everything around it. I always say there's two rules. One, you got to follow rich people and follow the city.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the city is sending infrastructure there, but then the other guys they've done the math. They've done the equation. And so being adjacent to those is usually those are our best projects that we have.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so you're just constantly looking, what does a new tenant want? I think the biggest eye-opening one to me was we had a rental and had to fix a faucet. And again, I kind of grew up in the business flipping houses, so I can fix a faucet here and there. I'm not going to be your finish guy, but like I can.
Did you have to do manual labor when you were a kid?
Oh yeah, my dad forced us into this building that was like a mesh. Sorry, Dad, you didn't force us, but I felt forced.
Yeah.
And so, but he taught us along the way of plumbing. Yeah, I was going to say, a lot of hours spent fixing this building. And so I kind of had a general idea, but he got me into flipping and that stuff. And so, but we had a rental and had to change a faucet. And I get a bill for $417.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is this? That's a $27 faucet. That's a 30-minute install, unless you just messed it up.
Right.
And so I was like looking at this and I'm like, I think we're creating this world where people don't know how to fix things. And the cost to fix them, because we didn't invest in trades, which was the greatest mistake ever, is going to force people into a rental housing situation.
Well, it's the difference between like a necessity and a luxury, right? So I think when you think of like luxuries, it's like, listen, I can clean my own house, but it's a luxury for me to have a house cleaner come in and clean my house, right?
Agreed.
But I can do it. The problem is that in society, a lot of things like that used to be luxuries that now have become almost necessities, because it's like, you know, shoveling your own sidewalk or mowing your own lawn or all of these things. You know, you picture those like whatever, you know, scrappy kids that are coming around door to door, say, you know, Mister, I'll mow your lawn, and it's like, I probably can mow it, but you know what, kid, hey, $20, you mow it, you know. But now people are like, well, I don't have a lawnmower and I can't walk to the edge of my driveway. Yeah. So now I have to have someone mow my lawn.
Exactly.
Right?
It's a forced function.
And there's a shift, and that might be a crude example, but when you start talking about the trades, it's absolutely real. I'm pretty sure that our grandparents and our parents could do basic, like probably swap out an outlet.
I think all of it. I think you had to.
Like plumb a pipe. Yeah. You know, you had to, right? Especially if you live rural at all, right? You just didn't have the luxury. And our plumbing's way
easier. We have PEX plumbing.
And I think, but you definitely have seen, I agree, you definitely have seen that now where it's creating an interesting dynamic in society where you all of a sudden you're victim to the trades because they can charge exorbitant rates. Okay. And by the way, this is the thing about, I think people bitch a lot of times about not being able to get good help or not being able to get like plumbers, electricians, or HVAC, or, you know, at reasonable prices. The other thing you have to realize is that you're also competing with like new construction products.
Correct.
And if I am an electrician, I would much rather go work for Jordan and do all the electrical work on 50 units.
Correct.
and it's new construction, everything's straight, level, plumb, square. It's the same unit over and over. And then, they get called from Johnny Homeowner and they're like, hey, can you come fix this broken outlet, this switch that doesn't work? I need this one overhead, fixture. And they're like, yeah, no, I don't want to do it. Not that they won't, but they would rather go do something clean and straightforward and that they can punch out than drive across town for 3 hours worth of work and hodgepodge it together. I think people are figuring this out. But so what they do is they throw like an exorbitant price tag on it. They're like, listen, it's going to be $700. And you're like, for a switch, an outlet, and a fixture? And they're like, yeah, like that's what's going to get me off my other job.
Exactly.
Driving a half hour to your house to do this mom and pop stuff that, by the way, your husband should probably do, or you could probably do yourself with a YouTube video
if you did it
minutes,
right? Well, it's the hardest part when you look at it, and I'm like, that's where I see it going. And so when we're focused on it, so I mean, I've had the contrast of having the house and then moving into the condo. I love it. I have a maintenance guy.
I said you have a handyman.
I have a maintenance guy. Because the building has a maintenance guy. And so then you're just literally like, when we check out, it's like somebody else is taking out the trash, somebody else is shoveling the sidewalks.
Yeah.
It's just a built-in cost. And then as thinking through it, and I'm like, and I know how to do the work.
Yeah.
Like we had a switch where I wanted dimmers. I can go switch out I know how to do that part. And I'm like, what about all of those old homes in Spokane that have quote unquote character? My mom would love it,
So
right?
I've seen a few people try to start this business, and I don't know if it's rough road to hoe, or if it's just not there yet. But like that handyman business, I think that would be like a solid play. Dude.
It's solid. So here's what the only compounding issue to that is, to your point of go to the Jordan or the Keith versus an individual,
right?
Is that a lot of these homes now are, what's the median price now? $426 or something, $430, but it got up to $470 at one point, right? And you're like, people are just getting into these. They're 5% down, they're 10% down, they're down.
Yeah.
And then you get in, and what happened? You found Yellowbird pipe. FYI, never buy that. But it's like, it breaks, and now all of a sudden you have a $14,000.
Oh, the Orangeburg pipe.
Yeah. And I'm like
yellow. You got yellow too?
I've been out of it a little while. Yeah. It's the worst one, actually.
It is the worst one.
They call it cautionary. It's cautionary. Or like Zinsco breakers, right? And you're like, oh, what is this? And your insurance guy comes through and he goes, we can't insure this.
Yeah. Aluminum panels.
And it's the pieces of like, I think owning a home will be cost prohibitive, but it takes away the best savings vehicle and wealth building tool that made the U.S. the U.S.
But
it's so weird.
And to spin a positive on it, it still is very attainable and it's still possible.
100%.
You just have to, I think, want to put a little time and energy and effort into home ownership and
learning that stuff.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, correct. And I think there's still people out there to do it. So here's another like aha I had this last weekend, and
this is my favorite. Nice.
When you have those moments, we've all had them, right? Where you've been like tolerating something for so long, and then you finally fix it, and you're like, oh my God, like why didn't I do that forever ago, right? So I'm going to tell a personal story.
God, so true.
My kitchen faucet. Yeah. My kitchen faucet like sucked. Yeah. It was terrible, dude. Like low pressure. It didn't like a spray. You know what I mean? It was just like, and I get the hot and the cold, and I get this like, dude, I have been tolerating this, like putting up with it. And just like honestly be like, I don't have time for this, like, oh, whatever. And it's annoying, but I don't spend a ton of time at home, right? Yeah. And it doesn't take much, but like a few long weekends at home doing whatever. And finally I'm just like, rah. And like same thing. It's like I go to Home Depot, I get a new faucet, I go back to my house, I change the faucet. It took me like 2 hours. I don't know.
Sure.
And it's like problem solved. Yeah. I have been tolerating this for like 6 months. Wait. And by the way, it's never the one thing. So then this was my aha this weekend is like, what stuff, like what puts people in a mood, or like what stuff for me, Keith, do I like, when people talk about, oh, do you exercise? Do you eat right? Do you work out? Like, what do you do as an entrepreneur to like keep like square? And like, we have all these life hacks. I think a simple life hack is just like literally taking like, I don't know, take a 3-day vacation from work, or put in some PTO and go fix the 15 things in your life that you have been like suffering through that could be fixed in 2 hours. Cause it was like, because it's never the one thing, right? No. It's like, I go out to start my snowplow truck the other day, it snowed a little bit, and it was like, the battery's dead.
Of course.
I get in my boat, the battery's dead. Like, the lawnmower doesn't start in the spring because the gas is old. The faucet, it's like all this stupid crap you know, and then that you're totally aware of like, and you can fix in a heartbeat, but you don't, but it needles at you.
Yeah.
And then like pretty soon you feel like your whole life's broken. And by the way, from the outside,
I like how
in,
this is like
people would not
facing
be
it.
like Keith's life's broken, but like there are days where I get up and it's like, now I see you have these problems and I'm just like, I'm so sick of like everything I'm touching is like excuse my language, like screwed up, like broken, like, and then you fix some and I'm like, oh man, shame on me, dude. This is so stupid. Like, I can
true.
relieve a quarter of my stress in life if I just did all of these little things.
So true.
But we'll put up with them till the end of time.
Well, we didn't even do it until we sold our house. By the time I fixed that thing up
It'll
and
be
had
so
it ready to
nice.
sell, it was great. I'm like every problem, and I think it's to that point though. It's like we've built such busy lives that the house can't be something that holds you back. So this is what I'm going through a lot with Whitney right now. It's like, okay, let's say we had somebody kind of talk to us about buying the Lolo lofts. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, do you sell it? And if I sell it, we go to a house. And so we're running this, because I don't like to do anything simple. We're running a side-by-side comparison of, do I just kind of buy investors out in the future, or do you sell the thing?
So I'm curious, like when you do this, is this like literally like a notepad with a T in the middle of it? Do you like make a T chart?
No, I'm an Excel
like,
spreadsheet junkie.
Okay.
So I put it in, and it's not even pros and cons. You're running the math, and I ran the math on stay here, 19 units of rental income, multifamily tax exemption, historic tax exemption. I don't like that it doesn't have garage parking, but I'm like, but there's a building or a lot next door. And so I ran that number, went and priced just $1 million home.
Right.
But I tried to go get something that was
Just
cool.
$1
And
million home.
it was set.
Yeah, it's
Because at
$1 million
450, I was like, well, let's play out what this would look like if you sold it, right? Because then you have proceeds.
Right.
And so I looked at it and I'm like, okay, well, that's $7,500 a month, almost $8 by the time I was taxes, insurance into that payment. And so it's one of those pieces where the more my life gets busy, it's like I started and it's one of the exercises. Actually, I took it from our first episode, actually. You'll love this. But it was to that bandwidth piece.
Yeah.
Not just about businesses and do I take on investments. It's almost like what is drawing that piece down. As I looked at it, I'm like, okay, we buy that. It's a forced function now.
Yeah.
Minimum I'd have to make if I pulled a trigger like that's $100,000. Or
so
do I stay?
Backstep for a second, because you guys live now down in the Lolo.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, yep.
And you were talking about the MFTE and the tax credit. Like, do you get to claim that like as your primary?
Yeah, it's not even primary. So the building gets it, and we own the building.
Okay, gotcha.
So so it's not condos. So it's not condos. That's the thing.
It.
So it's
that's what I was wondering. I was like, are you doing it?
It's living in an apartment building.
Okay.
So it'd be like you built behind you.
Your payment is quote unquote rent.
Yes.
But you are the owner of the building.
There you go.
So what you're saying, I see what you're saying.
So then I get kind of both. We looked at one day Washington will get their shit together and put together condo legislation that works. That's the housing we're missing right now. Yeah. And so until they do, it'll be apartments like this that provide some way. We're trying to come up with a creative way. It's just nobody wants to sign that long commitment. So it's a 7-year liability. And I don't know this well. There's people that know way better than me, but it's like nobody's going to sign a 5-year lease with payments to own it in the 8th year. But maybe, right? And so we're trying to...
Like, so what?
So in the 8th year, so in 7 years, so here you go. You build a condo building. And if you're listening to this and you know this way more, this is my crude version.
Build a condo, not an apartment.
Nope, build an apartment building. Because
you
build
an apartment building or a condo building? Even
if you build a condo.
Okay.
Either one. So if you build a condo for up to 7 years as a developer, you have liability if there's something goes wrong with the building.
Got it.
So usually what happens in condo developments is year 6, month 6, you get a class action lawsuit for all the things wrong with the building. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my understanding of it. And then, but what we're looking at now is let's build condo quality investments.
Yeah.
And then after that 7th year, in year 8, when you convert it, it doesn't have the liability. It has limited liability. There's still probably a few things that carry with it.
Sure.
And so then I was like, well, what if you could build a project, offer people that opportunity, but instead of the mortgage, it's like you owner. This is me creating. I'm trying to think of how you could get somebody that's interested. And I owner finance it basically. It's a lease to own.
Potential owners. Yes.
It's a lease to own, but you can't close till you're 8. Huh. And I'm thinking through it because I'm like, that is what's missing. Because I could be putting hundreds of units on the market that people could own, have a piece of the equity, and grow kind of that piece. Because I could list one of these apartments. There you go. You would take your 62 units you just built. And instead of leasing those, you sell them all for 250
Well, you
to
could
300.
do a lease
300.
option purchase.
Yeah, it just has to
right?
extend past that point.
Right. The option would just not be able to be executed till a year.
So you got to get people committed to that piece. But then the cool part
Which
is your rent would go.
probably do.
I think so
right?
too.
Well, it could or it couldn't, but the rent could go towards their principal or their purchase.
But really, in a 30-year
would be
mortgage, people don't understand this. Their first 4 to 5 years is mostly interest.
Yeah, it's so funny. I had this aha the other day. It's so funny when you look at. I do a lot of flipping, and I have for years. And in order to make my world move and do that, I have time and time again, hundreds of times, maybe thousands at this point, borrowed private capital.
Yep.
And I've borrowed money from people at rates of anywhere between 10 and 12%. I think the highest rate I ever paid one time was like 14. But 10%, 12% is common rate. And what's interesting is like today's mortgage rate's like, I don't know what you call it, 7.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And let's call it 6 for argument's sake. Let's say people are buying the rate down or whatever. What people don't understand is like with an amortization schedule, and this is talking to people out there who are not in the market or have or minimal experiences. A 30-year amortization schedule on a mortgage it means that you're going to pay your house off in 30 years. And we all understand is that with interest, you're going to pay more than the purchase price. So if I buy a house for $500,000, by the end of that 30-year mortgage, I'm just going to throw it out there. You're going to end up paying like close to double. You're going to end up paying $850 for that $500,000 house. Right. But what a lot of people don't know is that amortization schedule, they front load the interest.
Correct.
Right? So your first year, your first 2 years, or 3 years, or 4 years, you're actually paying like 80 or 90% interest. Mm-hmm. So your payment never changes. Like you might buy a $500,000 house and your payment might be $3,000 a month. You'll always pay $3,000 a month. Yep. But in those first year or two, out of that $3,000, $2,800 of that is interest, and only $200 is actually dinging your principal.
Correct.
And so you have this kind of like staircase, right? This like reverse staircase of like initially. So if you actually do the math, and I did this the other day just out of sheer curiosity because I was doing my taxes and I got the statement in the mail from your mortgage, like 1090. Yeah, it was 1098. So how much interest did you pay your mortgage company last year? So I looked at it. The irony is even though today's rate is like, call it 6, the way the banks front load the interest on the AM schedule, you're actually probably paying more like 12 or 14% interest. Like, because all of the interest is front loaded. Yeah. So if you did the math of like, okay, let's say my payment was $3,000 a month on a $5,000 or $500,000 house.
Yeah. Because there's no principal coming out.
It's principal
and
interest.
TI,
but if you actually just looked at the interest and go, okay, well, what is 2,800 divided by $500,000? Like, right? Like you get the true interest rate of what you would be paying if it was like a private money note. Yeah. And it actually is like way higher. Yeah. So like, to me, the irony was, I was like, oh, all these people always ask me like, Keith, how do you stomach paying 12% interest to somebody? And I'm like, well, anybody who has a mortgage that's amortized, you're basically paying like 10 or 12% interest for the first like 5 or 7 years you own it, because the AM schedule never kicks down.
Never kicks down. Yeah.
Well, I mean, eventually it does. But it's
15 years what you need to put it on. If you were like, hey, I care about this, but what the average person owns a home 5 to 7 years, and I don't think the days of we're owning for 50 years in the same home, like I don't know. I don't see it, but
I don't know. It's such
it's hard because you're turning that over. And again, I don't know on that one, but I think
here's what I'd say about that. One is you're absolutely right in the sense of, if we look at like the last, let's call it 70 to 100 years, people typically own a house between like 3 and 7 years. So we'll take the average of 5. So you buy a house, you're in it for 4 or 5 years, and let's just go through the average path of like a home buyer. You're a Johnny home or Sally home buyer. You've never bought a house before. You're a first-time buyer. You buy what you can. Mm-hmm. It doesn't take long before you either quickly grow out of it family-wise or income-wise.
Get better jobs. Yeah, get a better job. Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're selling that. You're buying house number 2. Yep. And then you're going to own that for 5 to 7 years. Yep. And then all of a sudden, again, your family's getting bigger, or you're making a little bit more money, or maybe your family's getting smaller. Yeah. Meaning like kids are graduating or going to college. So you downsize. So typically people are going to own 3 or 4 houses. Right, you're gonna have your starter house. You're gonna have the trade up house. Yep. Then you're gonna have like your kind of like majority long term house, and then you're gonna have the step down retirement house or whatever. So all of that though happens because of where our prices have been, where our prices are increasing, and what our markets have done. But if you look at European countries, if you look at Asian countries, if you look at places where real estate has already accelerated to be massively unaffordable.
Correct. Which we are.
Then you're going to go back to that hold for 50, 60 years. So
Correct.
I think that our grandparents and our great-grandparents in like the early 1900s or the 1930s or 1940s, they would buy a house and stay there for 30 years, right? Then all of a sudden society changed and we're like, nope, you're going to swap houses 3 or 4 times. Yeah. So of course, lenders change, loan programs change. Just the market changes, people's perceptions change, consumer trends change. I do start to think though, that probably in the next 10 to 20 years, you're going to start to see a trend back towards people are going, this might be our one and only purchase, or it might be our forever home, or we might be like half inheriting it, have to like pay down. And then you might go back that way. Yeah. So we do live in, I hate to always say like things will continue the way they are forever.
Nah.
Because they won't. But I'm saying like, I do see both sides of that. Like currently, yes, we tend to be these 5 to 7 year habitual consumer creatures in the real estate world. I do think we're not far away from it almost having to be.
But what does it do, right? Think about the stall now, right? The stall now is you have a 3% mortgage. Like that was the hardest part about selling my house. It just solved and helped pay off a few things where I'm like, it was 2 points, or no, sorry, that was 3 even. But I knew people with 2.8s. So when I look at it, it's like, well, some of it is like our GDP requires us to churn those things. What is it? For every house sold, it creates 3 jobs or something like that, right? It's some stat like that. But you look at it, what happens if this, we called it a temporary freeze because of low rates. What happens if it becomes a generational freeze?
Well, yeah,
and we're not trading.
People
we're not
in Europe
trading.
aren't selling unless you absolutely have to. And you're going to live like generationally in a home.
And you're going to hand the house down.
You're going to have grandparents, great-grandparents, if you have them, parents, kids, all. And it's like, hey, somebody in the family is going to live here for eons because we know if we ever let it go, we're never getting it back or very low likelihood. And so, but then again, what does that do to GDP? What does that do to the total economy when all of a sudden the house, so now you go new construction only, almost.
Correct.
Right? Like,
and all the demand's driven to new construction. What's it going to do? It's going to drive pricing up on new construction, which is going to then drive pricing up on existing. And it becomes this weird thing. It's almost like we're creating the thing we don't want because of a constriction. And again, we're in a unique pocket in the U.S., the Intermountain region, where we don't have crazy natural disasters. We have good power, good water. Like people migrate to. You can go to the Midwest. You can go to the Midwest and still get $100,000 home, right?
Oh, you can get
so then what you're either going to see is
$40,000 home, $30,000 home.
So when you go to London, which I lived in London, you don't migrate. There's nowhere to migrate. There's nowhere to migrate. You're not going to migrate to Omaha, Nebraska and buy a house, right? It's just, there's no room. And so I think we have a unique advantage here, but but when it lends to it, it's like, why do I still believe in multifamily as a long-term, like kind of wealth building tool? It's one, circling this full thing back, is like, I don't think we're going to have the manpower and people aren't going to understand how to fix a home. So the cost of living there is going to be significantly more. Second one is, I think people are getting more savvy with the stock market and what they do there. So I think earning money on your money will be a kind of a next piece. And then ultimately, I think cost of living, mostly driven by the house.
Yeah, it's a good question. Like in today's modern era, are kids and people more likely or even better off served learning how to invest and create more money so they don't have to work on their house and can pay somebody, or actually diving into like the nuances of working on their house, but not diving into the financial aspect?
Because it's all timing. Let's say you did all that and you saved. I mean, but the market's timing too. But you're just, all right, I'm ready to sell, and it's 09, right? And so you're driving this. I don't know. When I look at it, it's a skill set that we're being, because the trades aren't there. I think when trades come all the way back, you'll see our market recover better.
Yeah.
Because
do you
then
think they come back?
I 100% do. So why did I become an attorney? Mostly because I got bad advice in college and from people. But I was like, got the license, passed it. Well, what happened was everybody then wanted to become an attorney. So what does that do? It drives the dollar value down for an attorney.
Yeah.
Well, what happens when you're paying a plumber $400 an hour? Everyone's going to want to be a plumber until you're not. And then all of a sudden, they're going to drive a ton of people in the trade.
The only caveat I'd throw in there, though, that I see as a discrepancy is that it's a lot different.
It's harder. It's harder work. Yeah.
Like, I mean, well, who's not going to want to be a coal miner? I don't know. Everyone doesn't want to get shoved underground.
Yeah, coal miner's tough.
Coal miner's tough. A little bit. Being an attorney is a little bit different.
So, or you're going to see a fundamental shift in what a building looks like.
Yeah.
So you're going to see. I just looked up one on a website I got sent. It was $19,000 to have shipped here, and it was a fully encased, fully ready to go.
That's
Probably couldn't hit snow loads. Probably couldn't hit snow loads, but like I think there'll be something that's created because I think humans are too innovative. they're going
That's
to
what
hit
you're
a
going to
point.
start to see. You're going to start to see the Elon Musk Tesla of houses.
Yep.
And I don't mean Elon and Tesla. I just mean
just where it fixes
someone's going
itself.
to come into the industry and they're going to innovate
Yep.
to the level of they're shipping them, they're unfolding them, and
Well, it's boxable. Like that's one I looked at. They have a casita you send out, but it still has plumbing, still has electrical, still has to rely on our power grid, still has to rely on our sewer system, right? And I think there's just always going to be this middle kind of piece to it that it will be tough to overcome. But it's why when I look at it, I'm like, I think the more and more I look at it, I'm like, you telling me I can go focus on doing the work, doing my job, being home, being present, going on vacations, and I have to think about this stuff.
Yeah.
Like I thought owning vacation rentals would be awesome. It's the worst.
Well,
I just sold them because I'm like, now you're
if you
thinking about it.
vacation rentals, is go more of like what you and me are talking about is like condos.
Yeah.
So I had this big dream of like having like a lake house, right?
Love it.
Like
Love it.
wanting to go fishing,
Yes.
take my family to the lake. But then it's also like me and my wife took a honeymoon to Hawaii. And we're in Hawaii, and it's like, God, wouldn't it be sweet to have a place in Hawaii, right?
Everywhere you
but
go.
everywhere you go, you think that. And what I learned through real estate investing, and by the way, I don't have houses in Hawaii at all, but what I'm saying is, what I learned through real estate investing and owning a single family rental portfolio is that it's so hands-on, it requires so much work, and you have to go to that hot water tank or whatever, or get someone to. Whereas, like they're saying, the condo, it's one of those things where when the maintenance is like, the roof is someone else's problem.
Or
the
it's
siding is someone
everyone's.
else's problem.
Yeah.
Or it's everyone's.
Yeah.
The windows. Yeah. So what I would say is life hack, if you really want to become a real estate investor and you want to own vacation rentals or Airbnb properties, look condos, man.
Look
condo
condos
associations, look townhouses, because you have, I would say, 30% of the maintenance taken off your plate outside of those
100%.
internal walls.
Yep.
You can always get a bad renter or tenant or some holes in some
it's going to
shootout,
happen
whatever.
anything, though.
But you're not going to have to be responsible for the major hot water, the roof, the windows, the siding, the lawn maintenance, the snow removal, like all that kind of stuff. Like I would go condo all day. I'd rather own 20 or 30 condo vacation rentals than single family residence.
Yeah, once you get over the association piece, it's easy. It's got nuances in there, right?
I got a bone to pick with the city of Spokane right now. If I'm really going to we want to fire
a couple
this thing
bones
up.
to pick.
No, so like they now have like basically like an architectural review committee, citywide.
Yeah.
So the entire city. So I just want to say this out loud because it infuriates me. You basically created an HOA that no one volunteered to be in.
Correct. And don't have any way to really authorize it.
If you want to build a house or do whatever, the city has an architectural review criteria that you have to meet. I'm like, how's that different than an HOA? How is that different than somebody telling me what I mean,
it's not really.
My mind.
It's
I'm
not
like,
really, yeah.
Like you just kind of like the Gestapo came in and they were like, well, we're going to make the entire city an HOA. And I'm like,
well, and that's the stuff, right? That's why when real estate, like I think that's my eye-opening moments, especially the last few years. Rates has been a big one, right? It changes the fundamentals, but it's that there's no such thing as a passive investment. And really, you could call a stock a passive investment when it drops 50% or 30%. It feels less passive, right? But in real estate, it's like something new is coming down the pipe every time. The one I would say is everything's going to trend towards affordability, and it's going to be passed on to the people who have it now or have the house are going to help to, and developers will have to pay to help make this piece happen. And I think when I look at, do you like the new question I get, right? If I was going to have one, I got another one was like, well, I have, well, I think it would say, they said $50,000 and I want to buy a rental. And I was like, okay, well, why? I want to quit my job and I want to own a rental. And I'm like, okay, so that 50,000.
Okay, yeah, that would be a stretch, but yes, okay, going with that.
Okay, keep going with it, right? So you have $50,000. What do you do with it? Is what I would go back to.
Gotcha,
So I'm going to rework the question. Okay, 50,000. I have $50,000 down. Well, so if I go, I need 25% down to buy an investment property. So at 50,000, I got to buy a $200,000 development house or rental property.
Yeah. Which
where are you going to find it?
You're not going to.
I mean, you might be in Rockford.
Or if you do, it's going to be total.
You might be in
POS,
Rockford, right?
It's going to be in rural. Or, yeah.
Okay, so it's 200,000. So 200,000. I put my 50 down. I get 150 at 7%. Let's say it's interest only on that thing. I'm paying $1,000 a month for that money, just over actually. No prints, no taxes, no insurance, no nothing. I'm probably renting a $200,000 house for $1,400 maybe. and chances are it's in, or less.
Yeah, I mean,
And it's in worse shape. And so I looked at it, I said, one fundamental difference of when I started doing this and today is that is not a solution anymore. And there will be a pendulum maybe one day, but like in our area, in our markets, like you can't do it. That 50 could go into a 5% savings account, a CD now. And I was like, when I had that opportunity 5 years ago, it was 0.005% return on it. And I think what I love about real estate is it's going to cyclically move. And you're going to have single families be it one day. You're going to have multifamily the next day. You're going to have the industrial. Those I think are just run separate from it. But it's that piece of like, how do you? So the question was, I have $50,000 and I want to go become a real estate investor.
Yeah.
And so I was like, use it to learn more about wholesaling. I think that's a good opportunity, but you got to learn.
Yeah.
Partner. But then you got to be careful. You got to find the right partners for what you're doing. And then on the other side, I was like, well, what's your goal with the real estate? He's like, well, I want a new job. I said, that's the biggest difference I've seen is that there was a run up from 18 to 22 that it appreciated 22%. Rents were growing at 14%. You could have both. You could have both. You could have an appreciating asset and cash flow.
Premium rents. Yep.
And I said, that's gone. So then you're either going to the Midwest on a site you don't see, you don't understand, you don't know, or what do you do? And then he's like, well, anybody invest here anymore? And I go, well, yes. It's just what you're going to find is that you're either paying cash for it or you're paying a premium. It just kind of fundamentally changed how I looked at it. And so the question I'm spinning to you is, if somebody came to you, have 50,000, they want to get in and do this. They want to do this game at a high level. And what I've started to reframe, like look back at is like at that number, you're really targeting an opportunity. You're looking for an opportunity from an operational standpoint, not even from a real estate holding standpoint.
Yeah.
You're trying to find something that's a quick turn of a contract, or it's what?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think you got to pick your poison in the sense of any investment, and by that I just mean, I don't know. I've got buddies and friends that are stock guys, portfolio guys, and I got friends that are Bitcoin.
Yep.
And I got friends that are. I just happen to be a real estate guy, so that's where my heart lives. That's what I know. That's what I got into, and so now I'm kind of stuck maybe in the sense of honestly, like I'm gonna go get into Bitcoin tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like I'm like no way. Now, granted, if I had as little information about real estate as I do about Bitcoin, maybe Bitcoin would be a better option. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of a real estate guy. So my heart leans that way. But I do deter a lot of people from investing in real estate just by kind of sizing them up or talking about their goals or their ambitions or whatever. Because it's not for everybody. Yeah. And a lot of times you'd be way better off, going to be in a completely passive investor if you were going to go real estate at all. Like get into a syndication deal or get into a completely passive, even if it's a real estate investment, get into a passive activity. Because if you're not handy and you don't enjoy it or you don't have a passion for it, if it's just investing, I don't know that real estate's for you. But secondly, it's the thing about real estate is there's the security of it's a tangible asset that can evaporate. Bitcoin can evaporate tomorrow. We've seen it. Businesses can go out of business tomorrow. We've seen it. Last I checked, houses don't disappear. Yeah. And if they do, it's typically related to some sort of natural disaster where there's insurance and all sorts of. So it's so that's the one safety net I think real estate has. That's a huge safety net. Is it's like, well, there's this kind of backstop to it, where it's a tangible asset. But I don't know. I think for me, I'm going to train my kids to be savvy real estate investors. Yeah. I think it's still one of, if not the best investments that you can have. But I don't have the skill set to train my kids in the other world anyway. Yeah.
But let's say you train them. Let's take this one step further because I'm intrigued now. So you start your kids out. Are you going to fund them on their first investments to get there and be the money person for them? Or let's say, hey, you have 50. So your kid comes to you, right? Because it'd be easy for me to say, hey, low, like I've gone through the hard knocks of like pulling money together. And then you're like, well, the market did this. And you're like there's so many things in that to learn.
The other thing I love about real estate is if we're really diving down the rabbit hole of key spraying right now,
yes, always, always.
Here's the thing I love. It's a very odd investment because you can do it with no money. Yeah. Really. Yep. And I don't know that I would teach my kids to do that. I would definitely teach them the ways that that's possible. I just think that it's not the best way to do it once you have money. If you have money, investing in real estate with no money, even though it's still an option, is usually not the best option, right?
Yep.
But what
Only
I'm
in that
saying
market,
is
yeah.
that's one really cool thing about real estate is you can invest in real estate with no money down. And I'm not going into that today. It's not an investment seminar, but I can tell you 15 different ways you can do that.
Yeah.
The second thing, though, is you can invest in an asset that is worth more than whatever you put into it, whether that's zero or your down payment. But the market, when people talk about the market, if somebody says, hey, the stock market went up 15% today, what went up? Well, all the money that you have in the market went up 15%. If someone says to me, Keith, the real estate market went up 15% today or this year, well, what went up? The value of the house went up. Yeah. But if my value of that house that I own, if my basis is $0, I'm getting infinite return, right? Or if my basis is I put 10% down, if I buy a $500,000 house and I put 10% down, I'm only in at 10%. But if the market goes up 15%, that $500,000 asset went up 15%. Yeah. I've never experienced another investment that does that in the sense of there's not many people in getting into
you can do margins and
right. But for the most part, if you have a $500,000 in the real estate market and you have a $500,000 in the stock market, when the stock market goes up, you get a return on your $500,000 that's in the market. Yep. When the real estate market goes up, if you have a $500,000 of your own money in the real estate market, my assumption is you have more than a $500,000 in value.
Yeah.
Right?
Especially in our market.
If I have a $500,000 in the real estate market, I probably have a $2 or $3 million portfolio. Yeah. But now I'm getting the return on that. Yeah. So 2 other reasons why I would teach my kids to invest in real estate is A, you can do it with no money. B, once you figure out how to do it with money, it's even easier. But C, you're going to get a return on an asset value that is worth significantly more than your overall dollar value in the market. Yeah. And there's not too many other assets that do that. So I'm going to teach them to source deals. That's the first thing I'm going to teach them.
That's what I mean. So they come to you, they're ready to either one of them, right? Or they can jump into it, right? So they're at 20, they have them ready to go. Where do you?
I'm going to make them spit the whole thing to me. I'm going to say, what's
so where
the
are you
purchase
directing?
price?
Where are you directing them? Like what? Are you wholesaling them? Are you flipping them? Are you?
I mean, for my spoiled little brat kids.
There you go. Exactly. For my Lolo. Come on.
Yeah. For my kids, I would say I'm going to teach them all the math around the deal, and then I'm going to say, here's the nuance that comes into real estate investing. But lots of other kinds of investing, but specifically real estate is. What I find is that a lot of real estate brokers and agents and people don't understand real estate investing. That's fine. Then I get a lot of them that understand it or think they understand it, and they're really good at comparing apples to apples. Yep. So Jordan, if I was going to buy this house and it was at this rate with this money down, I have to put this much money into it or whatever, and I'm going to hold it this long, and I'm going to compare it to this other house that I have this. As long as the terms of the deal are the same on both sides, they're relatively good at that. Yeah. Right? So I can sit down and say, Jordan, this is a better investment than this. What most real estate investors or people in general are not good at is when you start comparing apples to oranges to pineapples to bananas. And people go, well, Keith, what are you talking about? Well, if we're just looking at real estate as an investment, it is extremely hard to compare. I'm going to buy this strip mall that was built in the 80s and has a Sunny Buns and 3 other little businesses in it versus this 15-unit multifamily old school apartment that's from 1995 that has deferred maintenance versus this brand new construction project that doesn't exist but could be 15 units of new construction, but it's going to take 3. Like, as soon as all of the terms and the nuances start to change where it's like, well, shoot, I'm just not really comparing 2 like kind investments. Yeah. Now you have all this strategy and nuance that comes into play. Right. That's what I would say long term I want to teach my kids is like, if you're picking investments, specifically real estate investments, then show me, explain to me, like, what is your overall plan and what is your exit strategy, A, B, and C. Yep. So are we buying it, fixing it up, selling it inside 6 months? Is it a 2-year deal? Is it a 5-year deal? If it's a 5-year deal, what kind of tax advantages are we going to have along the way? Yep. How are you going to write off like that? I think is where like really the sophistication. It's most real estate investors invest opportunity of a purchase price being low, upside on a resale being high. I'm a real estate investor. Yep. I'm gonna buy it below market. I'm gonna put money into it. I'm gonna sell it above market. I'm an investor. I'm gonna build it for less than it's gonna cost me to sell it. I'm gonna sell it. I'm gonna make money. I'm a real estate investor. I think that the the sophistication of real estate investments is when you can start to look at commercial versus residential versus development versus multifamily versus, and then you go, listen, if I'm going to give you $500,000, Jordan, how are you going to do the best you can with this $500,000 portfolio in 10 years?
Yeah.
Well, you better be doing more of that than just finding a deal that has some equity in it that you can sell for more money. And so I think that's what I would teach my kids is like in the long strategy is just the process of all the nuances of how you evaluate different opportunities and different real estate investments for their kind of highest and best use, but also for your portfolio.
Yeah. Or what you want to, right?
Right.
I mean, because the simplest one, I was thinking this low, there's no way she does what I want to do. Like, there's no way.
Yeah,
she'll be the child that doesn't. And so I'm like trying to think of my own my own strategy. But I was like, there's a simple strategy. And I was thinking through it, and they've heard it several times, but it's like, okay, so what I should advise, I think she wants to be a vet. Okay. Sure. So you should own your own building. If you're going to do that, open your practice, own your own building. But I was like, what you should do is buy one house every year for 15 years, put it on a 15-year mortgage. Yeah. So by year 16, let's say we start this at age 20. So I bought her 2 houses. So she'll have something to kickstart it with. But I was like, have you by year 16, so let's say she's 22, by 38, the first house will be paid off. And then refi it, take it out tax-free, and then put it on another 15-year. And so then the next year, the next one's paid off.
So now, I've never been a 15-year guy.
I know.
But I get it.
But the only reason is because then I'm like, no matter what, you're sitting in a good equity position. Yep. It's a 15-year term. And I was like, your focus, she loves animals. Go focus on the animals.
Yeah.
I think what I missed in all this was, I didn't miss what investors sometimes misses.
Jordan?
Oh, Jesus. That's its own podcast.
Where'd you miss?
That's its own, but like this one was like, people miss that I love this. This is my being a vet.
Yeah.
And me solving this and helping, and this is what I want to put my time in. But I'm like, that's 5% of the actual population. Most people just want a return on their investment.
Yeah.
And real estate was the best version to do it. And so a lot of stuff I'm working through now is like, hey, market dropped here, but here's what we're doing to help. Logan she won't want to touch it. And I was like, if you don't want to touch it, put it on this, that's your savings accounts every year. And then year 16, you'll make let's say the average price in 16 years for a single family home. It's probably $600. She'll then do a not tax-free takeout just above the basis. That's now she lives off $300,000 a year, and then puts it on another 15-year note, owns 50% of value, and then just every year it frees up again. Yeah. I'm like, in my mind, sounds so boring. But to somebody where you're like, I don't want real estate to be the thing. I want it to be a thing in my portfolio. I need something digestible that I can implement. But I look at it, I'm like, yeah, by 38, you have an annuity basically built in, let alone if you ever tap that cash flow in here. Correct. And so your goal every year is to make an additional $100,000 that you're putting as down payments on these things and getting that loan. Or and you have to do 15 because of the 15-year thing, but you could do 10, right? Because any lender will give you up to 10.
Fannie, Freddie,
before you hit that threshold. So I'm like, even if it was 10 of them, by 38, you're now collecting that tax-adjusted, tax-free, right? So by that point, let's say what we assume is, which we're in one of the lowest tax seasons in the U.S., right, is we assume taxes stay at a max of 40%, 36, 40, right?
Yeah.
I think there's 60 in Canada, London, all those places. So the cool part is with our system built in, you're talking about a tax-free draw of capital.
Oh, which is, what is it?
Which could be the equivalent of 480. Could be the equivalent of 480 in revenue. And so I look at it and I'm like, God, when I look at a building, I'm like, okay, we tear it down and go 7-story, right? So my mind just is, it just isn't a tool for it. And then when I look at it, I'm like, no, we're talking about practical advice that you give people. And it's like, God, just save for that piece. Now, single families is tough right now. I don't think that the model works as well just because you can't get the rental revenue. So you gotta be really picky. You gotta be really picky. But
the difference between single family and multifamily, in my experience, has been multifamily properties typically cash flow better.
Yeah.
Single family properties typically appreciate better.
Yep. And right? You can exit them easier.
Yeah. If I'm just giving vanilla advice to most people, what happens is you buy a single family house, put some money into it, or just hold on to it. When you go to sell it, your buyer is a multitude of different buyers, but you can never take out the fact that somebody just might want that specific house. They might want to live in that specific neighborhood. They might want to be down the street from grandma. They might want to be in this school district. Like people will emotional buy.
It's an emotional buy.
Or pay
it's
a
an
premium.
emotional buy. Yeah.
That never happens with commercial property. Actually, never. Typically,
Shouldn't.
very rare.
The 1031. I think the 1031 forces some of that, but like outside
but for
of
the
that,
most part, investors go. I don't care that this 6 units next to grandma's house.
Yeah.
I don't care what school district it's in. I care about what's the purchase price, what's the rate, what's
what are you
the
getting in
cap.
rents?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, exactly.
And so, because of that, multifamily properties typically will cash flow better if bought in right or correctly or managed properly. But single family cash flowing properties is kind of it's not great right now. It's hard to buy a property,
but it won't ever be great in our area again.
and have it. Well, maybe, but we're gonna have to have some industry. We're gonna have to have some jobs come. We're gonna have to have some, some people are gonna have to start making some more money as far as the.
But the way it'll trickle into our community will end up being through X number of jobs, and they'll want to own their home.
Right.
And so I think it's just that temporary housing piece boosted that rental value for a while. But like that's my fear is things that used to be able. Plan B is we'll just rent this out. Like Plan B means you'll lose some money while renting this out while waiting for it. And so I'm interested to see kind of if we can maintain appreciation
values. If you math
values.
those numbers too, and I'm not trying to get too, heady, but if you math those numbers too, like there's been a multitude of properties that I bought in my life that I had a reverse cash flow situation on. So negative cash flow. Yep. My payment was $1,000. I was running it for $800. Yep. I was having to put $200 of my own money in it. That's not too much different than investing in a Roth IRA or a 401k or anything else. Like, granted, it wasn't cash flowing, but it was in an equity position, and the market was appreciating. And like again,
and now it probably does cash flow. Yeah.
Well, not only does it cash flow, but there was multitudes of properties that I bought. Let's say I bought a property and I spent it $200 a month, and there's 12 months in a year, and I fed it for 5 years. So it's like, okay, all said and done. Exactly. So all said and done, I'm in this thing $6,000.
Right.
But in the time I owned it, it appreciated 10%. It was worth right. So.
Or you got to treat it like that.
You just have to look at it like that.
So you got to treat it, and you can't look at the
my down payment
month-to-month
was my down payment plus my cash on month, cash on cash.
Yeah.
And then your return comes at the end. Yeah. So not every real estate investment has the cash flow monthly to still pencil be a great investment.
Good question, since we've only answered 2 in an hour.
We're asking questions.
Yes,
I thought we were just ranting. You know what my problem is? My faucet, my kitchen
Why
faucet.
do we need guests? Why do we need guests? I love you all, but here's one good one, and I heard this on a podcast. Would you buy a negative cash flow asset today? Mm-hmm. And if so, why?
Yep. Because it has nothing to do with the overall value of the asset.
Okay. So when you're looking at the overall value of the asset, are you doing it on a 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 2 year? What's your snapshot that says, yep, it's worth buying this because obviously you see a value play?
Well, so for example, I'll just give you a super crude, unrealistic example, but your aunt owns a condo in Hawaii. She's come on hard times in her life, and she's like, Jordan, I can't afford this condo anymore. I have no money to my name. If you just take over payments, you can have it. And the payments are $2,000 a month, and no one's going to rent it for less than $1,000. So you're going to have to feed it $1,000 a month. But she's going to give you a condo that's worth $500,000.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm doing it. Right? Like, of course, I'm going to reverse spend $1,000 a month because she's giving me a condo worth $500,000 because she's going to get it taken by the bank, right? Like, this is an extreme example, but I'm saying,
but you're coming in at a negative cash flow position.
It has nothing to do with its value, I guess, is my point.
Yep. Well, it does. Otherwise, she would have sold it. Chances are, if there was value in it at the time, she wouldn't have said, Keith, take it. And she would have said, hey, I have $200,000 of equity. I'm going to sell this thing.
Sure. But I guess this goes back in the little wholesaling conversation. But my point is that the negative or positive cash flow doesn't have anything. Let's flip this on its head. What if somebody said, Jordan, I'll give you my house today that I Airbnb, and it makes me a positive $500 a month in cash flow after I pay all the bills. But I owe the bank $500,000 on it, and I just got an appraisal last week, and it's worth $300,000.
Yeah.
Are you going to take a property that's in a negative $200,000?
So I'm not.
I'm not either, because I don't care about $500 or $1,000 a month of cash flow.
So you're saying when you they're good.
So
better. I'll reframe that. So you're saying I don't even care what the cash flow. I mean, within reason.
I look at
if I look at it and what I'm acquiring it for is still under what it's valued at.
Well, I'm
and
acquiring it
even though
for-
today's value, let's say you couldn't, are you looking, how far in the future are you looking on that number?
It's all about the exit strategy of the asset. So I think it depends on
Yeah,
like
okay.
what the plan is. But I'm saying I've bought in properties that don't cash flow. I've bought in properties that I had to feed.
Yep.
And I've bought in properties that make money. Very rarely have I paid more for a property than it was currently worth.
Okay. There you go.
Unless there was some future potential
Of a different use, probably. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Of
I
a
think your
chain
office,
that
right? So
bulldoze
your
a
office
house
could be
and
your
build an
office could be a
apartment
development
or
play
an
outside of itself.
Exactly.
I mean, honestly, you should evaluate that.
But unless there is some future potential use that is somewhat speculative, I'm not overpaying for a current value, typically.
Okay.
I have, but I'm saying like that's
So negative
one out
cash
of
flow to you isn't the issue.
Negative cash flow
So
to
look
me
past
is
that.
nothing to
Look
do.
past negative cash flow, and you're looking for value today / future value of that asset to do it. Yeah,
correct.
that makes sense.
So I think that's a little bit more of a sophisticated real estate investment strategy. It's not how I'd advise people to start, but definitely once you get into having properties that cash flow and you can use that cash flow to support or supplement a property that's reverse cash flowing.
Right.
I've made a lot of what I would say are pretty good lucrative investments buying reverse cash flow properties because they get ignored a lot by the market.
100%. Yeah.
A lot of people won't even look at them.
Yeah.
And sellers will typically discount price on them knowing that.
Correct.
And the competition's low. So it's actually can be quite the niche if you can stomach it.
If you're prepared for it. Yeah.
And what I've also found is most people just have a sheer mental block around the idea.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because the idea of buy it and you're going to start losing money day one.
Buy it.
Or prepare.
Buy it.
I mean,
Buy an asset that's losing money today.
the billboard sells itself, obviously.
Want it? And I would say, but the cool thing is that eliminates a lot of the competition.
Yeah.
And then if you're smart about it or pay attention, there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, and I think back to those points, I think that's where my mind has had to grow to that macro look at it of like, we're not building enough. There's going to be compression on pricing again. There's going to be compression on rents again. And the only thing that stops it is we don't have jobs. But then you look at Washington, and we just bumped the salary range from 59 to 69, I believe. And in 2 years,
I'm
it has
so
a chance.
pissed off at Washington.
It has a
State
chance
right
to go up to 90. And so, what does that do? It's that affordability piece. So even if we're going to keep increasing in value, do wages keep up? Well, pretty soon Washington's going to force wages to keep up and maybe not equal.
But you can't. Like I don't know.
It just drives pricing.
It's an
so then
economic
goods.
misnomer.
Yeah.
It like a lot of people, and I don't know if this is universally true, but I'm going to say it like it's true. And if someone wants to fact check me on this, they can. But one of, if not the only, economic inflationary aspects is wage growth.
Yeah.
So gas goes up, gas goes down. Toilet paper goes up, toilet paper goes down. Wage growth never goes down.
No.
Like historically. So if minimum wage goes from $7 to $12, historically it's never going back down to 10.
No.
It's never going back down to 7. Like wage growth or wage inflation is one of the types of inflation that kind of is like permanent.
Yep.
So when the Fed's talking about we have to stifle inflation, and they're talking about inflation in general. So we're talking real estate here. So we look at the cost of a house. Well, yeah, I have the cost of the PEX plumbing, the cost of the copper pipe or fittings, the cost
Every
of
material.
all the materials. And those can go up and down, a sheetrock and lumber going down, up. But when the workers that work on those houses start getting paid more and more money, the cost of that house will forever be increased because the only way the price of the house can go down or the apartment or whatever you're building is if the materials went down and offset the cost of the labor, right? So the labor goes from $18 an hour to $23 an hour. Maybe the lumber goes from X to Y, and that offset coming down makes the house more affordable. It's typically never the labor. So the issue with increasing the minimum wage, or when Washington tries to force, is you're causing inflation by doing it.
Correct.
So, hey, we need to pay these people more money so they can afford more. So then you force that pay.
Right.
But now you drive the expense of everything up, which means they now can't afford it, which means now you're going to force them to. So it's like being on an eternal teeter-totter with inflation and with wages. And I would say that's not something that everybody knows,
No.
and it's not something that everybody thinks about, but it really is something that our leaders and our politicians should understand, and they should stop trying to force wage growth to create affordability.
Yeah.
It's a mathematical anomaly. It doesn't work. In the politest way I can say is stop doing that. Yeah. It's a terrible idea, and yet they do it, and people go, yeah, well, that makes sense, because it makes sense.
It makes sense. I mean, fundamentally,
right?
but the issue is that it's going to drive up the cost of each piece. And so the other issue is that when you do a building, there are 1,000 different things you pay for. To your point, there are different levers. When you increase a salary, that's one lever. That signals to all of these that that's the new price.
Yep.
And to your point, that's what's been so frustrating, so hard. But I don't know. It's one of those. I think we'll do one. I'm trying to think of who the best guest would be to dive into this one with us. But it's like, I think there will be a way to do affordable housing that has to be re-envisioned from the way we do it now.
Well, I can
that's
tell
outside
you right
of
now,
heavy
you need to
government
get the government
subsidies.
out of it.
Yeah.
You need to get the government out of it.
Yeah.
And I come from a farming background. We've had this conversation before. But you know when farming got screwed up? When the government got involved.
So subsidizing, yeah.
You know when housing starts getting screwed up? When the government gets involved. I'm not an anti-government, but I'm saying like you when you start to mess with any market in any way, shape, or form artificially, you're going to cause disruptions in that market, and then you try to fix it. Oh, we tweak this, and it's like poking the hole in the dam and trying to fix the leaks. It's like you're causing your own problems, and then you're trying to patch.
And the reality is like
you're causing your own problems.
And we're designed to think creatively about it. Like, and you look at like the projects they create in like Chicago, like on paper probably looked awesome. Yeah. I'm going to create 1,000 units in some area for low income housing. You're like, I mean, you didn't think through a lot of that. Versus, hey, Keith and Jordan as developers are like, look, there's a huge population of people that need rentals. Let's build this building that can accommodate X amount or can do that. And I'm like, that is what the cool part about the market is. Now, it doesn't mean you solve it. It doesn't mean there's not greed, all those things included, right? But I think that's when we're skipping over, and we know, like there was some stat, I hope this wasn't true, but it was like to build an affordable housing unit in LA was $836,000 by the time they were done building that affordable 1 bed, 1 bath. And you're like, it just was never designed to be efficient. Like what's efficient? Give me a multifamily tax exemption. That lowers the amount I have to charge in rent.
Yeah.
Give me a sales tax exemption. That lowers the amount that costs me to build. And then what everybody thinks is like, we're just skimming off the top of that thing. I said, no. That's what makes the project actually work, to get rents where we don't have to keep increasing them. And I try to explain it and try to do that, but I don't know. But we will do one entire one of these on like concepts around affordable housing. So if you're listening to this and you know the best guest to debrief that or kind of dive into that with us,
an economist or something,
just how you do it in the right way. Because I think it's going to take a re-envisioning if we really want to solve this. It's not going to be wage growth. It's not going to be those pieces, and labor's not going down anytime soon. So,
well, dude,
awesome.
I think we've rambled enough.
That was one question that led to it. There were multiple questions, but actually there were within that. But I love it. I think it's a good addition because we have amazing guests every time, and I'm like, it's a fun way for us to dive into kind of some currently local topics that I think impact them. But if you haven't seen it, you do have to check out Keith's Garland project. Turned out amazing. It's going to change the face of it, and I think I'm excited to see Garland. I'm excited to see it. So,
all right, you guys, signing off today. Awesome. Chestnut Checkers, Keith and Jordan out.